Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Bits About Bots, where I have the pleasure of interviewing experts in the field, both in intelligent automation, AI, and today, Test Suite. Hi, Shaun. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is just an absolute pleasure and a joy to be with you today.
Oh, I'm so excited. So I know we have so much to get into, so let's get this party started. A few of the things that we talked about along the way. So Shaun, for those of you who don't know, had a stint in Dallas for a while. I'm now living in Dallas. And so we met up at Mi Cocina, a cult classic, a favorite, to begin this discussion about how testing is revolutionizing the market. So Shaun, I think before we get started, a lot of our listeners know what intelligent automation is. They understand RPA. They're thinking of dabbling in other adjacent technology. And this test suite for a lot of our clients, prospects, partners has really become kind of out of left field. So why don't you tell us about how you went from an RPA enthusiast, a practitioner, one of the first clients of UiPath, to now really leading and spearheading the adoption of test suite at UiPath?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for it. You know, it starts. I think there's kind of a software quality crisis going on today, and it's like whenever I see that my phone has updated overnight, I used to be excited because I'd have all this new capability and I'd be able to do new interesting things, and now my phone just gets measurably worse every time that happens. And I feel like that's this sense I get about a lot of things. And one of the best coders I've ever known was this partner of mine in a tech company in Dallas. And this guy was named Tim Klein, still is. And this guy, I tell you, he would write the most elegant, bug-free code, which just worked the first time out. Every time. It was crazy. And it was almost supernatural. And he had this really unusual way of coding. He'd go to a park, usually, you know, or someplace in nature, or maybe a restaurant or something like that. And he would take typing paper, a stack of typing paper and a pen, and he would write out the algorithm in pen on the typing paper. And this took about 90% of the time. You'd spend 90% of the time just sitting in nature, writing it out. And when he was done, he would take this stack of typing paper, he would go to his computer and he'd just type it in. And it would work, again, very first time. And he said that was his favorite part. The typing was his favorite part because it was the only part of the process where he could listen to music, because his brain was just kind of in the zone. And he was describing being in a state of flow. And he developed this unusual practice because at his university, where he learned to code, the computer lab was really, really cold. And so he hated to be in there for very long. And so this hardship gave him this kind of mental discipline that made him exceptionally good at writing software that was thought through, it was extremely well designed, and it worked just the first time. And I think that we're experiencing a quality crisis in software today because it's gotten really easy to make code that kind of works. And guys like Tim Klein are exiting the workplace. And they're being replaced by people who learn to code with their IDE autocomplete, or now by having Claude or ChatGPT do all the coding for them. And, you know, I'm seeing posts on LinkedIn all the time about how, we don't even need coders anymore. I think that the most successful software engineers in the next 5 or 10 years are going to be able to figure out how to manage that tension, right? And get the best of both worlds. And they're going to be able to benefit from the productivity enhancements made possible by modern tools, including Gen AI, but have the engineering discipline that were embodied by my buddy Tim. And the core of engineering discipline is a quality mindset. And that is all about testing. And so I'm sitting around, looking around at this quality crisis that we're having, and I wanted to do something about it. And that's how we got where we are.
That's fantastic. That sounds like a why, totally. So that's fantastic. And I think too, a few of the things that you mentioned there too, kind of go back to some of this concern that we have, right? As RPA was adopted, the market began to have concern about how this would interfere or replace humans. Now the advent of AI, what portions of my job, what kind of upskilling am I going to have? And I think the answer, undoubtedly across the board when it comes to technology, the implementations, and then ensuring the resilience of the code that we deploy, through testing, is that there's always going to be a need for that cognitive reason from a human, to kind of assuage and help that. Now, testing is undergoing a bit of a disruption, having a little bit more autonomy and a little bit more of a push a button, see it work, evaluate the results, rather than iterative testing, and some of the traditional ways of regression testing. So tell us a little bit about the driving forces. What's driving that shift? Is it because software development is getting faster, so testing has to get faster? Give us some of the reasons why, in something so precious of ensuring that code, that underlying code is resilient, why are somebody like you comfortable in being part of automated testing?
Yeah, well, it's all those things, but a lot of it is driven by the advancements in technology that we're seeing. We're just absolutely having a wave of disruption crash over the software development industry, and especially in quality. And it's all being driven by Gen AI. And again, going back to all the videos you see on LinkedIn of the people talking about how we don't need coders anymore. And Zuckerberg went out there and said, oh yeah, we're going to get rid of all of our mid-level coders. And there's truth to that. It's not true on its face, but there is a fundamental thing that's happening there. But the new technologies are a double-edged sword. On the one hand, they make coding easier. And I'm going to put easier in quotes there because it makes the actual typing easier, or knowing, kind of like getting an algorithm out on the paper. You don't have to go do the research to know things deeply in order to be able to type out the code anymore. But it also makes it easy to be sloppy. And so there's going to be a lot more code that has to be tested. And it makes, by the way, that making the coding easier also makes automating tests easier. It lowers the bar for what it takes to create the automated test in the first place and maintain it over time, which has always been just the Achilles heel in automating testing. Bottom line, if you could test automatically everything in your SAP implementation, you would do it. But it's not economically feasible to do it. But Gen AI makes it a lot more economically feasible to do that because it reduces the cost of generating the tests in the first place, and it reduces the cost of maintenance over time. Now, the other side of that cord, or the other side of that sword, is that it's also making testing a lot harder, in the sense that now I have to somehow figure out how to test these Gen AI capabilities that are getting infused into the applications. And in order to do that, I can't just test it one time. I can't just test it. It's not deterministic anymore. And so I can't just say, oh, well, I tried it a couple of times with some different inputs and it works. Now I have to kind of monitor over time whether the thing is continuing to deliver the business value the percentage of the time I expect, right? It becomes a lot more fuzzy. And so on the one hand, the testing, creating automated tests is way, way easier, but the testing task, the job that the tester has in front of them is way, way, way harder because of the capabilities that Gen AI brings to the table. And all of that is leading towards more automated testing, more autonomous testing, and more continuous testing.
No, I totally agree. And so for the listeners kind of new to some of this, what Shaun's talking about too is the componentry, right? And so before, if you were writing code in a streamlined kind of mechanism, RPA was always sold as a very low code, easy for a business user to kind of put, the cogs in place together to kind of make a task or action take place. With the advent of AI, generative AI, LLMs that come in the mix, there's a fluidity that had never been, part of the mix when it comes to testing. Testing had always been hard coded, is kind of the term that we used to have. And so the fluidity that's been introduced by some of these LLMs, by the models changing, by the augmentation of different data sets, it really gets us to a point where it does get fuzzy, and it becomes difficult. There's not a point in time where you can say, yes, this is good to go. It is continuous, and the autonomy behind some of the tools that we're seeing on the market really are changing the way that goes. One of the things, Shaun, that I think kind of comes to mind from that too is there's a little bit of apprehension, in terms of the speed and safety, and because everything's going so quickly, is my data safe? What are the governance measures that, automated testing can kind of live into? And then we'll talk a little bit about the different stakeholders involved in testing, because I think it's important for, the modern organization to understand, kind of who comes together. But first and foremost, as our clients are coming to us, trying to find faster, better, smarter ways, to deploy, what it is they need to do to stay relevant in the modern world. What are some of the ways that we can help mitigate that concern or that fear, of something different, or perhaps misstepping or, missing the complexity behind some of these more difficult test opportunities?
Yeah, I think I would talk about two things in relation to that. The first is you need to establish clear guardrails from the very beginning. And, think about that in the abstract first. Like, wait a minute, what are the guardrails I need in place here? I remember I was part of an RPA deployment one time. This is, old typical RPA, and we were writing a capability that would generate checks. At the end of the story, what ended up happening is the bot was generating actual checks that were then signed by real people and sent out. And the idea, it was for a health insurance thing where people were getting reimbursed for minor expenses associated with going to the gym or whatever. Oh, it's a $10 thing. And so these checks were supposed to be $2, $5, $10, $15. And at some point, the bots got confused and started spitting out checks that were like $15 million. And now, obviously, the error was so significant that the humans caught it, and it didn't end up causing a problem. But if the problem were $150 instead of $15 million, well, I don't know that it would have been caught. And the thing is, like, they should have put in guardrails on that bot that said the expected check range for this is somewhere between $1 and $20. And if we get outside that range, then throw a flag. And that never happened. And I think it's so easy to get so passionate about this technology and want to put your stake in the ground and want to make sure that people know you're on the avant-garde and all of that. It's so easy just to move fast without thinking about it, and move fast, break things. And that's a fine attitude when you're trying to forge a path through the forest. But there's always a tension. And that tension is about risk. And that tension is about, what can go wrong and making missteps or getting yourself into a blind alley. And so you've got to have clear guardrails for you and your AI testing initiatives. And just like, if you're driving on a mountain road, you want those guardrails on the side just in case. You need frameworks to ensure that your AI-powered testing stays focused on the business objectives and maintains reliability and security. And the second thing I'll say is that slow and steady wins the race. I live in San Diego, and we have our military people here, and the military people that I talk to always say that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that's what I think I would say about this too, is be deliberate, have your guardrails in place, and then proceed with intention. And slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
I love that. And it's almost like I used the analogy once to say, it's like bowling with bumpers. You got to start with, with a little bit of help from, partners, from guardrails, from governance, from sets of compliance. It doesn't change the way that the business rules work. I think a lot of people think, oh, we're inserting text, so all the process rules the road with people, don't apply. And that's not the case.
Right.
In fact, they're even more important.
That's right.
Because you have to be mindful and ensure, modifications of some of your processes to adhere to some of the demands technology makes on our workforce. So I think that's spot on.
That is such a great observation, because we're used to thinking about, oh, we have handed this task off to computers, and computers do it right, or they do it the same way every time, or like our brains are wired to believe that. But this new technology doesn't behave that way. We're not handing the task off to computers. We're handing it off to 7-year-olds. And so you don't need fewer guardrails. You don't need less attention. You need more. And by the way, the 7-year-old won't get tired, won't get bored, won't ask for more money, won't do any of those things. Like, it's fine, but it's still a 7-year-old.
And requires the training and the discipline that today's 7-year-olds require.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the organization, because I think that's a good segue. We did a testing as a service webinar last year, and I was overwhelmed with the registrants that came from quality assurance, process improvement. It's like they were desperate to connect the dots between businesses leading some of their tech charges, IT trying to instill the governance, and poor quality assurance being stuck in the middle, trying to figure out, who's right, where, when, how, and at what point is that threshold? What are some of those guardrails that we establish? So let's talk about the modern workforce, an organization that has tremendous amounts of software that's deployed both internally, externally, maybe as a revenue stream. What would that organization look like? Who are the stakeholders involved as it relates to testing decisions?
And one of the fascinating things that we're seeing amongst our clients and partners is that we're seeing a reshaping of how organizations are approaching their testing. It's not this siloed function anymore. And I've been railing against the testing silo in a long time. I used to talk about how if one team is throwing something over the wall to another team, then that's too diffuse. And so nobody actually owns the final result. They all own, oh, no, I tested it, and well, I sent it over the wall, and okay, we didn't get the operation succeeded, but the patient died, right? and so companies are now creating these cross-functional teams where testers are working alongside developers and process automation experts and business analysts. And this integration is crucial, because testing isn't just about finding bugs. It never really was, but I think that people forgot about that. Testing is about ensuring that we're actually getting the business value out of our technology.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I think also it's reducing the time to deployment in many cases as well, which has a tangential benefit, a tangential ROI, and a value stream that you might not even be quantifying, in thinking through what your total cost of ownership is today. No, I totally agree. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is, we've touched a little bit about how this changes the workforce, some of the stakeholders involved. What are some of the opportunities for, college kids today, who might have code aptitude, but it's less and less of something, when you hear somebody like Zuckerberg announcing that he's getting rid of his middle level coders, it might be discouraging, as a career path to think through. But what do you tell the coders of today, the computer science majors, the ones with aptitude in some of these proficiencies, in what they should be studying, understanding, or becoming part of, to adhere to some of the changes that we see coming down the pike in the marketplace? Yeah,
I think, as with anything, there's always a tension. And there is a tension between, in this Gen AI wave, speed and safety. And there's a tension between quality and speed. And there's a tension between the skills that exist today and the skills that need to exist tomorrow, and all of those things. But what I will tell you, if I were someone coming out of college today, I'd be both concerned and I'd be very, very excited, because the opportunities to actually create value are so enormous. It rhymes with the year 2000. And in the year 2000, there were a zillion internet companies that were popping up. Oh, we're an internet company that's going to sell furniture online, and we're going to sell cars online, and we're going to sell, we're like Montgomery Ward, but on the internet. And 99% of these companies went sneakers up.
Yep.
But there's no question that the internet completely changed how we do everything and enabled things that could never have been possible before. This conversation right now is an example of that, right? And so that is exactly what's happening right now. And it's going to be impossible to predict which are the real technologies and capabilities and companies that actually take hold, but there's zero question that 5 years from now is going to be a completely different landscape than we have right now. So the important thing is to stay flexible and learn as much as you can. And by the way, if you're just now getting out of college looking for something to do, your brain is the most malleable in the marketplace. Your skills are the most adaptable. And this world, this environment rewards the people who don't know the trusted and tried and true ways of doing things and who can invent new things. So that's one thing I would say. I would also say that there's been a change, or there is a change in stakeholder dynamics. And that is that CIOs and CTOs are now actively involved in testing strategy. It used to be a thing that they just went, oh, well, yeah, I mean, of course we do testing and it's fine. And they ignore it because it's just until it's not working and they release code and everything blows up. And then the testers are the bad guys. The testers are never the heroes. But that's actually changing. And testing is becoming a strategic enabler rather than a bottleneck, right? It becomes, we're now going to compete on actual quality because clients are actually paying attention to whether they're getting the business value out of the technology that you're offering them. And so the testing capability becomes all the more important. And the last thing I'll mention on that is the evolution of skills. And we're seeing this fascinating evolution in the skills required for testing professionals. So technical skills are absolutely still important. Like you want to have them, but the bar is lowering, right? You can go to ChatGPT and you can say, write me this code that does X, Y, and Z. And so that is no longer a hidden capability. What's becoming crucial is the ability to think strategically about quality and about technology, to understand the business impact, to think holistically and to effectively collaborate with other humans and with the AI tools. And that is creating new career paths. It's possibly destroying or curtailing some also.
Yeah, no. Oh my God. It's so exciting to me, right? I've always been, tech adjacent. I've taken developer certifications and checked the box to be able to translate some of these things. But, my superpower has always been, from my time at BlackBerry, talk about dinosaurs and, not, if you don't pivot, you perish. But all the way from my time at BlackBerry and looking at, how we were testing and deploying what hardware componentry met the software componentry in the cabinets, right? And then ensuring that those processes were flowing through it, ahead of the curve of understanding the strategy, then it all went downhill, right? And I think there's a special place for folks who have the ability to translate technology into layman's terms and have those conversations that say, if we can decrease our testing time by 15%, it yields this much time to market, right? We'll be on shelves, by October, instead of, January of next year. There's some quantifiable targets that can be established from the bowels of the testing department, now that they can really shape shift the way deployments, happen, especially if it's front facing. So it's really exciting. And I think it's my lesson to everybody that I mentor. And we have the upcoming webinar that you're going to be on about talent and, and the upskilling in this age. My message to everybody is always learn and gobble up as much as you can. And if you can't explain it to where that 7-year-old understands it, then you don't understand it yourself, right?
Absolutely.
And challenge yourself to constantly simplify these terminologies, and don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Just try to be the most effective person in the room, to understand kind of how to translate that. Because I really think they keep talking about soft skills. Well, soft skills really means just being a human, talking,
right.
Right.
Like
learn how to have a
people
conversation.
Understand.
Learn how to have a conversation, right? So
I would add to that.
Yeah,
that humans, we are wired to think in terms of stories.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it at this testing, like you don't need to talk about you want to talk about the numbers associated with your testing. Oh, we achieved this level of quality and all that stuff, but none of those things matter to anybody until you connect it to their real life experience in a way that they can feel. And that's about telling a story. Mm-hmm. And so as you think about where you want to be in your career 5 years from where you are today, the more it has a component of being able to tell a story, the easier you're going to find. It greases the wheels on things. And it has to be, you're going to want it to be a good story. You're going to want it to be a true story. But telling a story is better than telling no story.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's less about, aptitude tests, and I'll digress for a minute, but aptitude tests coming out of high school in the United States have always been so bonkers to me, because it's so black and white, yes or no, do you know it, do you not, and the real world is about applying the yes, no, black and white to, the bigger picture, the vision, or how it goes. So I totally agree. So we could talk forever and ever and ever, but I want to wrap up with a couple of things that I think you have a unique perspective in, having deployed this. And I know that, and I'd love for you to give an opportunity, a teaser about what's coming down the pike at UiPath with Test Suite. So let's talk about some of the best practices to approaching automation, I think, which informed a lot of the changes that UiPath is about to announce. And then what you see over the next 5 years. Let's talk about the next month, some of the exciting deployments that you're allowed to talk about. If you can't, I don't want to tip your hand. And then what we see coming down the line in testing.
I would love to do that. So the first thing I would talk about is everything is becoming agentic, and that includes testing. So watch out for what does the world look like in the agentic universe? And agentic testing is enormous, and you'll start to see some demos come out of UiPath on what we mean about agentic testing and what it enables. You'll probably, if you're up to speed on what our testing capabilities are, we've had autopilot for testers for going on about 6 months now. That's been in production, and people are getting tremendous benefit out of it. It's a capability that generates it analyzes requirements, it generates test cases from those requirements, it automates those test cases using code. It's exactly what you'd expect that AI would do to testing. But agentic actually takes it to the next level, and it starts thinking about doing exploratory testing, or testing a goal, or analyzing an application with respect to user experience and that sort of thing. And so that's really the next level of what testing looks like. I would also expect to see testing starting to morph into monitoring, just like I was talking about before, where if you have AI infused applications, they don't behave deterministically anymore. So it's not enough just to test it the one time, either manually or automatically, and then confirm that we didn't have any regressions. We have to test the production installation of this thing to make sure that it's actually continuing to deliver the business value. We've had things go into production that then later break because the LLM decided, oh, well, I don't do that sort of thing anymore, or it conscientiously objected to it because it thought, oh, you're trying to build a bomb or something that it's not allowed to do. And so, you got to be careful about those things. You have to monitor for those things. You have to think it through. And obviously those are bugs, right? We're not trying to build a bomb. The way we were talking about it, thought it was. I would also start thinking about proactive and predictive testing. So looking ahead, I see testing becoming a lot more proactive and predictive instead of just finding defects. AI-powered testing systems are going to anticipate potential issues before they occur. They'll highlight the things that could happen. And it'll fundamentally change how we think about quality assurance. And I think that testing also, like I said, morphs into monitoring because the systems aren't deterministic anymore. I think that quality will become a lot more autonomous. We're moving towards a system towards systems where AI agents can independently explore applications.
Yeah.
Right?
So tell me, so Shaun, one of the things too, because we've been working with you and we've been at it with the autopilot and the test suite, and that's been tremendous. But I think the familiarity of the user interface was something that like RPA folks and kind of automation people were comfortable with, and it made a lot of sense. And there's apparently, rumor has it, a little bit of a launch to how the user interface or the experience of the application is going to be. That's a little bit more familiar to tried and true testers. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's going to morph?
I would be happy to. Yeah. So that's a really, really exciting development that is a really big deal. And as UiPath starts to focus a lot more on testing and the experience of the tester, of the application tester, and as we start going into this agentic testing, we are planning to release something called the testing cloud. And the testing cloud is designed, there's no real additional functionality that we're providing above and beyond what the UiPath capabilities are today. But we have Automation Cloud today. I mean, Automation Cloud feels like an RPA tool. Now, it's a very capable testing tool, but it doesn't feel like it. An application tester has to hunt around for the functionality that they expect to exist. But the testing cloud is meant to be a place where an application tester is going to feel at home. And so that is something that we're really, really excited about. We intend to really, really embrace the concept of agentic testing, and Testing Cloud is going to be one of our first forays into trying to make application testers have a place where they can really plant their flag.
That's fantastic. So you guys heard it here. This will all be announced at a year end for UiPath. Shaun, I am so excited. I know that you're going to be on some subsequent conversations with us. Hopefully I'll see you at the sales kickoff. Thank you so much for sharing your time, your knowledge, and we look forward to more inflection points over the course of the year, seeing what you guys turn out.
Anytime. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We'll be in touch soon.
Perfect. Thank you.